My name is Bradford. I'm a professor at Columbia Law School, specializing in EU law, digital regulation, and international trade and antitrust. For the past 2 years, I have been working on a book called Digital Empires: The Global Battle to Regulate Technology. I wrote Digital Empires to lay bare the choices that we are facing as governments, as tech companies, or as digital citizens on the direction of the digital economy. I really wanted to explain with this book what are the forces that are shaping those choices, what are the consequences or stakes involved at making those choices. Because ultimately, they will determine whether we as humans control technology, or whether it's technology and its providers that are controlling and exploiting us. There is this growing sense around the world that digital economy needs to be regulated, but there's no real consensus on what that regulation ought to look like. Digital Empires argues that there are 3 predominant ways to regulate the digital economy. We have the American market-driven model, the Chinese state-driven model, and the European rights-driven model. So the American model is focused on free internet, free speech, and incentives to innovate. The Chinese state-driven model focuses on preserving the power of the state, making China the technological superpower, but also leveraging technology towards surveillance and censorship to entrench the power of the Chinese Communist Party. Then the European model preserves the fundamental rights of individuals and the democratic structures of the society, and also focuses on more fair distribution of benefits from the digital economy. The reason I call these digital empires is that none of these regulatory models are confined to the jurisdiction itself. Instead, each digital empire is engaged in imperial expansion. They are exporting their regulatory models abroad, and then, in that process, expanding also their relative spheres of influence. The US is exporting the private power of its tech companies. China is exporting primarily the infrastructure, and the Europeans are exporting their regulatory power. So the American digital empire provides the foundation for the digital economy as it exists today. Facebook, for instance, has 3 billion users in 160 countries. So the American tech companies are providing services and products that the consumers around the world love and have come to depend on. But they are also responsible for many harms that can be associated with the global outsized influence of these companies. China is exporting its digital infrastructures. It is building a digital Silk Road across Africa, Latin America, Asia, parts of Europe. It is building telecommunications networks, undersea cables, and surveillance technologies, and in that process, exporting Chinese norms and technology standards. Europeans, on the other hand, they are not really developing the technologies, but they are mainly developing the regulations that govern these technologies. So through a phenomenon that I have called the Brussels effect, often the European regulations become global regulations because the global tech companies decide to follow the European rule across their global conduct and global production. There is a compelling argument that the tech companies actually cannot effectively be regulated. There are many leading thinkers who refer to tech companies as the new governors, or describe the world not as bipolar or multipolar, but technopolar. And it is true that regulating these tech companies can be difficult. Tech companies do remain beholden to regulators. But in the US, the problem is really the dysfunction of the Congress. That runs very deep. So the Congress would need to muster the political will to regulate. Europeans have been able to legislate, but they are struggling to enforce their regulations. China, on the other hand, hasn't faced the democratic constraints of lawmaking or enforcement. And that leads to a rather disturbing conclusion. that the digital economy is either governed by authoritarians or the tech companies, and those are the true digital empires. So that should be a very unsettling conclusion for anybody who believes in liberal democracy as a foundation of our society. I don't think there will be a single dominant digital empire. One conclusion that I arrived at is that the American digital empire is really declining. There has been a tremendous backlash in this excessive power of American tech companies, both in the US but also across the world. So there have been many instances where, for instance, American tech companies have provided a platform for hatred and disinformation, election interference, you name it. And that has then prompted a reaction in other governments and even in the US that we do need to bring the governments back in, and the self-regulation of these companies is not enough. But I doubt that we find the global consensus whereby all countries would go behind one of these models. Instead, what we are seeing is an emergence of a bipolar digital world, whereby a group of authoritarian or authoritarian-leaning countries are coalescing behind a variant of the Chinese model, whereas many democratic countries are shifting towards the European rights-driven model. So we see this battle emerging between techno-democracies on one hand and techno-autocracies on the other. And in this model, it is for the US to choose whether it wants to consolidate a united democratic front, move closer to the EU, and then challenge the Chinese digital authoritarianism, or whether it will let China win.